There is a photograph I keep inside a small tin box beneath my bed. It is worn at the edges, the colors faded the way old things fade when they have been handled too many times by hands that needed something to hold onto. In it, two boys stand in front of a crumbling brick wall. One is 10 years old, all wide dark eyes and knobby knees, his arm wrapped fiercely around a smaller child of 5 who is grinning the gummy, gap-toothed grin of someone who does not yet understand that the world is capable of cruelty. The older boy is not smiling. He is looking directly into the camera with an expression that does not belong on the face of a child. Something ancient, something decided. That older boy is me. Or rather, that boy is who I was before I learned that love can be a door that swings both ways. I look at that photograph sometimes, late at night when Soo-Yun has fallen asleep on the other side of our thin apartment wall and the city hums and glitters outside the window like a fever dream. I look at it and I think about all the versions of myself that have lived inside this body, the abandoned child, the determined teenager, the exhausted young man counting coins at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, and the man I am now, sitting in the amber warmth of my own cafe while the smell of roasted coffee beans drifts through the air like a promise kept. This is the story of how I got here. All of it. The ugly parts and the beautiful parts and the parts one am still not sure I have words for. It begins, as most stories of survival do, with loss. I was 10 years old the day my mother abandoned us. I remember the way the morning felt, heavy, gray, like the sky itself had pressed down close to the earth and was holding its breath. It was the sort of autumn morning in Seoul where the air smells of something burning far away, leaves perhaps, or paper, or the remnants of a life being quietly dismantled. She woke us early. I remember that. Earlier than usual, and she dressed Soo-Yun in his good clothes, the navy jacket with the little brass buttons that had belonged to a cousin, and she combed my hair with more care than she had taken in months. I should have known then. Children always know before they allow themselves to know. There was a tenderness in her hands that felt like a goodbye, and I felt it move through me the way cold water moves through the body, sudden, total. "Where are we going, Yama?" Soo-Yun asked, still half asleep, his small fingers wrapped around hers as we walked. "Somewhere safe," she said, and her voice was very quiet. The orphanage was called Harang House. It sat at the end of a narrow street behind a community garden that no one tended anymore, a 3-story building of pale yellow plaster with blue shutters and a gate that creaked when it opened. A woman came out to meet us. A plump woman with a kind face and reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She and my mother spoke in low voices while Soo-Yun and I stood on the steps holding hands. I didn't understand all the words they used. Words like circumstances and temporary and until things improve. But I understood the way my mother's shoulders looked, caved inward, defeated, the posture of someone who had already made the decision and was simply carrying out the last formality of it. She crouched down in front of us. Her eyes were very red. She cupped Soo-Yun's face in both hands and she said, "Be good, my baby. Be good for Yama." She hugged me last and I let her, though even then something in my chest was already hardening. Something was already building a wall. "I'll come back," she said against my hair. She did not come back. I stood at the gate and watched her walk away, and I kept watching long after she had turned the corner and disappeared, as if looking hard enough might bring her back. Soo-Yun tugged at my sleeve. "Hyung," he said, and the word, that single word, cracked something open in me and cemented something else shut all at once. "When is Yama coming back?" I looked down at my little brother's face, his round cheeks, his confused dark eyes, the brass buttons on his jacket, and I made him a promise I had no business making. I was 10 years old and I made it anyway with every atom of seriousness I possessed. "Don't worry," I told him. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And that was that. That was the moment I stopped being just a child and became also something else. Something that would carry. Life at Harang House was not the horror of stories. It was not cruel. The Ajumas who ran it were mostly kind, the food was plain but filling, and the rooms were shared but clean. But it was colorless in a way that is hard to explain. Like living inside a watercolor painting that someone had rinsed with too much water until the edges blurred and the shapes lost their certainty. There were 14 of us children when we arrived, ranging in age from 18 months to 16 years. We sorted ourselves into the quiet hierarchies that children create wherever they gather. The older ones who had been there longest held a kind of authority, the younger ones clung to anyone who offered warmth, and in between there were the rest of us, navigating the daily choreography of shared meals and shared bathrooms and shared grief. It was in the first week that I met Tae-woo. He was 8 years old then, 2 years younger than me, but he carried himself with a stillness that made him seem older. He was a small boy, dark-haired and dark-eyed, with a sharp, serious face and a way of watching everything around him as if he were cataloging it, filing it away for later use. He slept in the bunk below mine, and for the first 3 nights he said nothing to me at all. Just watched. On the 4th night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, turning my mother's last words over and over in my mind the way you turn a stone in your hand when you are trying to understand its weight. I'll come back. She's not coming back, you know, said a voice from below. I startled, leaned over the edge of my bunk. Tae-woo was lying on his back, staring at the same ceiling, his arms folded across his chest with that peculiar composure of his. What? I said. Whoever left you here, he said matter-of-factly. They don't come back. None of them do. I should have been angry. I wanted to be angry. But there was nothing unkind in his voice. It was simply honest, the way a person is honest when they have already survived the thing they are describing and the grief has cured into something harder and more useful. Hello guys, welcome to Mimiel. Before we dive into this story, note this is an original work of Mimiel. If seen in another channel that is not Mimiel, please report that channel for impersonation and copyrights. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, share and like for more stories like this. Now let's continue. How long have you been here? I asked. Since I was 4, he said. 4 years. We were quiet for a moment. I have a brother, I said finally. Soo-yeon. He's 5. I know, said Tae-woo. I've seen you with him. Pause. You're good with him. Something about the way he said it, simply, observationally, without any decoration, settled in me like warmth. No one had said anything like that to me before. I'm Soo-bin, I said. I know that too, he said. And then after a moment, I'm Tae-woo. That was the beginning of us. In the months and years that followed, Tae-woo became the closest thing to a constant I had at Hwarang House outside of Soo-yeon. We were different in almost every way. I was expressive where he was contained, impulsive where he was deliberate, anxious where he was steady, and yet something about that difference was precisely what made us fit. He was the quiet anchor and I was the restless tide, and we needed each other in the way that those two things always need each other. He was an alpha even then. You could feel it in him, that gravity, that particular density that some people carry in their bones. And I, though I wouldn't formally present until I was 16, was unmistakably an omega in temperament if not yet in biology, sensitive, deeply feeling, wired for connection in a way that sometimes felt like a wound. He looked out for Soo-yeon too without being asked. I noticed that. On days when I was at my limit, fraying at the edges from the weight of trying to be strong for my brother, Tae-woo would quietly sit with Soo-yeon and tell him stories he invented on the spot. Fantastical tales about dragons who ran noodle restaurants and detectives who solved crimes using only their sense of smell. Soo-yeon adored him. I did too, though I would not have used that word at the time. At 10, 11, 12, I simply knew that Tae-woo was important. That he mattered to me in a way I did not have the language for yet. Families came and went. Prospective parents walking through with hopeful eyes, children presented and considered and selected. Every time a family showed particular interest in me, and it happened more than I sometimes wanted to admit because even at that age I had a certain quality that drew people's attention, something in my face that stopped them, I refused. Politely but absolutely. We'd love to have you join our family, Soo-bin, a kind-faced woman said to me once when I was 13. We have a lovely home in Bundang. Thank you, I said with all the formality I could muster. But I can't go without my brother. They did not want my brother. They were looking for one child, and Soo-yeon was younger and sweeter and easier to imagine slotting into a family portrait. I knew this. I also knew that I would never leave him, and I knew that refusing adoption again and again meant that I was choosing the orphanage over every future someone else might offer me. I never regretted it. Not once. What I regretted, what I still ache about sometimes in the quiet of early morning, is that I never got to say a proper goodbye to Tae-woo. He was adopted when I was 15 and he was 13. A wealthy couple. I remember the woman's perfume, expensive and floral, and the man's watch that caught the light when he shook the Ajuma's hand. They had no biological children. They had come looking and they found Tae-woo, and Tae-woo, who never showed what he felt on his face, looked at me across the courtyard on the day he left with something in his eyes that I did not know how to read. He said very quietly, I'll find you again, Soo-bin Hyun. I didn't think he meant it. Or perhaps I did, and I simply didn't allow myself to believe it because I had already learned that promises, however sincerely made, were fragile things. He got into the car. The car drove away. And that was the last I saw of Kim Tae-woo for 15 years. When I turned 18, I left Hwarang House. The Ajumma who ran the house pressed an envelope into my hands. A small amount of money, the address of a community housing office, a list of government programs for aging out youth. Her eyes were kind and sad in the way that eyes are when a person is doing the best they can within a system that is not built for best. Take care of yourself, Soo-bin, she said. I will, I said. And then, I'll come for Soo-yeon when I can. When I have something to offer him. She nodded. She understood. Those first years were, I don't have clean words for them. I had enrolled in a part-time vocational program while working whatever jobs I could find. Convenience store night shifts, delivery runs, dishwashing, serving at a pojangmaka until the early hours of the morning smelling of pork fat and soju. I slept in a room barely large enough to contain a single mattress and a second-hand desk. I studied at that desk until my eyes burned. I called Soo-yoon every Sunday, and each time I heard his voice, bright, young, still unshadowed in ways I was determined to keep him, I felt something in me that was equal parts love and terror. I graduated. Barely, but I graduated. I had a certificate and I had 18 months of hard-won savings, and I had the deep, abiding certainty that it was not going to be enough. The jobs I applied for required degrees I didn't have, or experience I hadn't accumulated, or connections in the invisible social architecture of Seoul that I had no access to. I was 23 years old, presentable, hardworking, intelligent, and comprehensively invisible to the economy I was trying to enter. I took administrative work when I could find it. Data entry. Filing. The kind of work that pays just enough to prevent catastrophe and not enough to allow for anything beyond. And then Soo-yoon turned 18, and he came to live with me, and the mathematics of our survival became suddenly and urgently impossible. He was beautiful, my brother. Taller than me now, with a wide bright smile and my mother's cheekbones and an enthusiasm for life that I had somehow, against all odds, managed to preserve in him. He enrolled in university, economics, which he had chosen with a seriousness that made my chest ache with pride, and he was earnest about it, staying up late with his textbooks spread across our small kitchen table, asking me questions about the world with the openness of someone who believed the world would eventually answer back kindly. I did not tell him how much his tuition cost me. I smiled and said we'd manage. And then I sat alone in the bathroom at midnight and stared at the numbers on my phone's banking app until they blurred. It was my friend Jae-hyun who suggested it. Jae-hyun was a year older than me, quick-tongued and pragmatic, someone who had also navigated the world with very little and had developed, over time, a certain unsentimental creativity about survival. We had met at a part-time job years earlier and maintained a friendship built on mutual honesty and the occasional shared meal. He told me about the club over ramen matter-of-factly, the way he told me everything. The pay is insane, Subina. I'm talking 10 times what you're making in a month for a few nights a week. And you? He gestured at me vaguely. You know you're not exactly difficult to look at. I stared at him. It's just dancing, he said. Artistic. Very clean establishment. I know a guy. I did not say yes. I did not say anything. I ate my ramen and I walked home in the cold, and I sat on the edge of my bed while Soo-yoon slept on the other side of the wall, and I thought about it all night. This was not the life I had imagined for myself. I had imagined, quietly, always quietly, because hope had always felt like an extravagance, a cafe. My own cafe, small and warm, with good coffee and mismatched cups and plants on the windowsills. A place that was mine, that I had built, where people could come and sit and feel for an hour that the world was manageable. This was not that. This was something that would require me to offer my body to the gaze of strangers, to become an object in the visual economy of other people's desire, to strip away not just my clothing but some layer of dignity I had spent years carefully constructing. I cried. I'm not ashamed to say it. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark and I pressed my hands over my mouth and I cried until my shoulders ached from the effort of crying quietly. And then the sun came up. And I thought about Soo-yoon's textbooks spread across the kitchen table. And I made myself a coffee and I called Jae-hyun. Tell me more about the club, I said. The club was called Obsidian. It was in Gangnam, tucked between a high-end restaurant and a luxury hotel in a building with a matte black exterior and lighting that managed to be simultaneously minimal and overwhelming. The clientele were wealthy, the kind of wealthy that wears itself quietly, that does not need to announce itself because the watch and the posture and the particular way of occupying space say everything. There were no rowdy crowds here, no cheap soju and shouted conversations. This was a place of dim booths and expensive whiskey and men who could afford to observe the world from a comfortable remove. The manager was a slim, efficient man named Park Juno who assessed me with the brisk professionalism of someone evaluating a piece of inventory, which was precisely what I was to him. He told me the rules, the pay structure, the expectations. Touching was not permitted. The performers were not escorts. The stage was the boundary. Beyond the stage, nothing was offered and nothing was taken. I told myself this repeatedly in the early weeks. The stage is the boundary. This is performance. This is art. This is a means to an end. And in a way it was. I discovered something I had not expected. I was good at it. Not just aesthetically, though I was not unaware of the way I looked, pale-skinned and fine-featured and possessed of a quality that read as both delicate and quietly magnetic, but in the actual craft of movement. I had never danced formally, but my body seemed to know things my mind hadn't articulated. The way a hand could trail slowly across a shoulder. The way stillness, strategically held, could build tension in a room. The particular power of a gaze directed at no one and everyone simultaneously. I was good at it and it paid extraordinarily well and I hated it. I hated it with a steady, sustainable hatred that I stored somewhere internal and did not allow to interfere with my performance. I hated it every time I walked through the matte black door and felt the club's air close around me, warm and perfumed and close, charged with the specific electricity of collective wanting. I hated it as an idea of myself, this version of Su Bin who existed to be watched. And yet, Su Yun's tuition was paid. Our refrigerator had food in it. I had opened a savings account, the first I'd ever had, and watched the number in it grow with a feeling I had no adequate word for. Something adjacent to safety. Something that, if I squinted, might even be called freedom. 10 months. I told myself 10 months and then I would have enough of a foundation to pivot, to find better work, to save for the cafe, to build something real. 10 months and was when I first noticed him. He was different from the other patrons. Most men in a place like Obsidian maintained a certain performance of their own. The studied ease, the deliberate indifference, the pose of a man who has seen everything and is impressed by nothing. They watch the stage in the way people watch things they have already decided how to feel about. It was a particular kind of looking. Transactional. Consuming. He did not look at me that way. I noticed him because he was in the same booth for the third consecutive Friday, and in a place that rotated its clientele with the regularity of a conveyor belt, repetition was notable. He sat alone. He ordered whiskey but barely drank it. He wore dark, well-cut clothes that suggested money without performing it, and his face. He was young. Younger than most of the clientele by at least a decade, I thought, though there was something in him that made age feel like an approximate concept. His features were sharp and still and beautiful in the severe way that mountains are beautiful. Not inviting, exactly, but impossible to ignore. Dark eyes beneath straight brows. A jaw set with a determination that looked permanent. And he watched me, not the way the others did, not with that consuming blankness, but with an intentness that felt strangely private, particular. As though he was seeing something the others were not. It unsettled me. I tried to ignore it. I danced my routines with the same controlled precision I always brought to the stage and I did not look directly at him, which was itself unusual. I typically made eye contact deliberately, strategically, because it was part of the performance. But something about this man's gaze made me feel seen in a way I was not sure how to manage. Week after week. The same booth. The same stillness. The same whiskey barely touched. The same eyes. I asked Juno about him once, casually, trying to sound uninterested. The young one in the corner booth? Dark jacket, usually alone? Juno raised an eyebrow. That's Quan Tae-woo. One of the biggest names in the country right now. Built his company from nothing in 6 years. Even with his adoptive family's money behind him, he did things no one expected. Ruthless in business, they say. Very private. Quan Tae-woo. I stood very still. He doesn't cause trouble, Juno continued, misreading my expression. Very polite. Tips well. Keeps to himself. Right, I said. Thanks. Tae-woo. It couldn't be the same person. I told myself this with the firm conviction of someone who suspects they are wrong. Kim Tae-woo from Harang House had been adopted by the wealthiest couple in the country. I hadn't known which couple, only the size of the wealth. And this man, Quan Tae-woo, sat in a corner booth in an expensive club and watched me dance with those dark, intent eyes and did not touch his whiskey. It's a common enough name, I told myself. Korea has many Tae-woos. Forget about it. I could not forget about it. And then one night, 3 weeks after I learned his name, someone spiked my drink. I still do not have a clear memory of that night. What I have are fragments. Impressions. The way the lights in the dressing room seemed to swim when I sat down after my last set. The metallic sweet taste of something wrong in the back of my throat. Juno's voice somewhere distant, and then other voices I didn't recognize. A hand on my arm, too firm, too certain, guiding me in a direction I didn't want to go. I tried to say no. I know that I tried. My voice came out soft and useless, like a word spoken underwater. And then, a different hand. Larger. Removing the first hand with a simple and absolute authority, the way you remove something from a child who should not have it. A voice, low and controlled and carrying a specific quality of cold anger. Get your hands off him. Now. Silence. A scuffle that I registered more as vibration than as sight. And then that same voice, closer now, stripped of its anger and replaced with something entirely different. Something careful, something aching. Subina. I've got you. You're safe. I've got you. I know the name. I know the voice uses it. But I can't hold on to the moment. It slides away from me like water from cupped hands, and what I have next is darkness and then morning. I woke in a room that was not mine. White walls. White ceiling. The particular silence of a very expensive, very well-insulated space. I lay on my back in a bed that was softer than any I had slept in, beneath covers of a weight and quality that my body recognized immediately as far beyond my usual experience. The light through the curtains was the pale, uncertain light of early morning. I sat up slowly. My head ached. My mouth was dry. Every detail of the previous evening was hazy and wrong and incomplete, and the wrongness of it descended on me all at once. What had almost happened, what had been in my drink, how vulnerable I had been. I burst into tears. I don't mean I cried quietly. I mean I sobbed, clutching the expensive covers to my chest, in the way that people cry when they have been frightened very badly and the fright has been stored overnight and is only now being released. Great heaving sobs that I couldn't control, that I pressed my hands over my mouth trying to muffle, that came out of me regardless. The door opened. I flinched, pressed myself backward against the headboard. He stood in the doorway. Older, of course. 15 years older. The soft-faced 8-year-old boy from Harangue House had become this tall, broad-shouldered, strikingly handsome man with the same sharp features and the same dark, watchful eyes, now wearing a simple white shirt and dark trousers, holding a glass of water, looking at me with an expression that cracked my heart open cleanly in two, because I knew that expression. I had seen it once before years ago in the courtyard of an orphanage in the moment before a car took him away from me. It was the expression of someone who has been trying very hard not to feel something and has just stopped trying. Tae-woo, I whispered. He exhaled. One breath, slow and deliberate, the way a person exhales when they have been holding something in for a very long time. Hi Soo Bin Hyung, he said quietly. And then he crossed the room in 4 steps and pulled me into his arms, and I, who had been holding myself together for 20 years through sheer force of will, went entirely to pieces. He held me while I cried. He didn't say don't cry or it's okay the way people do when they are uncomfortable with tears. He simply held me, his arms around me with a certainty that felt like something constructed over years, like a wall built slowly and deliberately, and let me cry until the crying was done. When I finally pulled back, my face was a disaster. He handed me the glass of water. The man who, I started, has been dealt with, Tae-woo said simply and finally, in the tone of a person who has closed a door and sealed it. How long, I swallowed. How long were you watching? He met my eyes. Something moved across his face. Something complicated, something I could not yet read the full grammar of. 3 months. At the club. 3 months, I echoed. Before that, he paused. Set down the water glass. Looked at his hands. Before that I was looking for you. For a long time, Soo Bin Hyung. Years. The silence that followed was the quietest thing I had ever inhabited. I couldn't find you at first, he said, his voice careful and measured, each word placed down like something fragile. After I was adopted, they changed my name. The Kwans. My legal name became Kwon Tae-woo. I had resources eventually, but it still took time. Harangue House had closed. Records were incomplete. He paused. And you had been very thorough about disappearing, Hyung. I wasn't trying to disappear, I said. I was just surviving. Moving. I didn't know there was anyone looking. He looked up at me then, and the directness of it, the rawness of it, stopped my breath. I told you I'd find you again, he said. I meant it. You were 13, I whispered. I know how old I was. The words fell between us and settled there, and I looked at this man, this stranger who was not a stranger at all, who had sat in a corner booth for 3 months watching over me while I danced on a stage I hated, who had crossed a room and removed a threat with the quiet efficiency of someone who does not hesitate when it matters, who was looking at me now with 15 years of something unspoken pressing against the surface of his composure, and I felt something shift in me. Tectonic. Foundational. Tae-woo, I said carefully. What is this? What do you? I love you, he said, simply, directly. In the same tone he had used 15 years ago to tell me that our parents were not coming back. Factual, unflinching, the voice of someone who has stared at the truth long enough to stop being afraid of it. I have loved you, he continued, for a long time, since before I understood what that meant. And I know that we've been apart for 15 years and I know you may have completely forgotten me and I know this is a breath. A lot. To lay on you at 7 in the morning when you're still recovering from. Tae-woo, I said softly, interrupting him. Stop. He stopped. I looked at him. This serious, beautiful, controlled man who had spent 15 years looking for an Omega boy from an orphanage with the single-minded certainty of someone who has decided that a thing matters and will not be dissuaded. And I thought about all the ways I had built walls around myself over the years. The careful economy of my emotions. The way I had learned to keep hope small so that its disappointment could be managed. I didn't forget you, I said. I thought about you. More than I admitted to myself. Something moved across his face. But, I continued, I need you to understand what my life is right now. What I am. Where I am. Before anything. I know, he said. I know about Soo-yun. I know about the cafe you dream about. I know a great deal about your life, Subin Hyung, because I paid attention to it for 3 months from a corner booth. Pause. The ghost of something that was almost a smile. And I would very much like to be part of it. If you'll consider it. I stared at him. I thought, fleetingly, that this was possibly the most surreal morning of my life, which was a competitive field. You're very strange, I said. I know, said Kwon Tae-woo. Are you hungry? I can have breakfast brought. I laughed. Unexpectedly, genuinely, the kind of laugh that arrives before you've decided to allow it. And he looked at the sound of it with those dark eyes like I had given him something. Yes, I said. I'm hungry. The weeks that followed were unlike anything in my prior experience of the world. Tae-woo did not rush me. This, I learned quickly, was the paradox of him. The same absolute determination that had led him to search for me for years, to sit for 3 months in a corner booth, to speak his love as plainly as a weather report, coexisted with a patience that was almost preternatural. He did not crowd me. He did not demand. He simply made himself present in the particular way that still, reliable things are present, and he waited. He came to learn everything about me almost immediately, about Soo-yoon, about the cafe I dreamed of, about the stripping and the shame I carried about it. And I learned about him, slowly, in the way you learn a landscape you are beginning to trust, incrementally by walking further into it. The boy from Harang House had become something remarkable. The Kwons had given him wealth and opportunity and a name, but what Tae-woo had done with those things was entirely his own. He had built a company by the age of 24 that was now among the most powerful in the country, operating with an incisiveness and speed that the business press found simultaneously impressive and alarming. He was known to be ruthless in negotiation, immovable in conflict, utterly certain in decision. People feared him in the way they fear things that are completely uninterested in being liked. With me he was none of those things. With me he was careful and attentive and, beneath the composed surface, desperately, nakedly fond. It was the contrast that caught me every time. The man who, in public, was a force of nature becoming in my kitchen, the person who stood at my counter watching me make tea with an expression of such complete contentment that it made my heart seize. We fell into something before either of us had formally named it. Long conversations over late meals. Saturday mornings where he sat across from me at my small table reading while I annotated recipe books, and the silence between us was the good kind, the kind that fills with the warmth of mutual presence. He drove me home from work and waited until I was inside before leaving. He remembered things I mentioned in passing, the brand of coffee I preferred, the novel I said I wanted to read, the song that came on the radio once and made me go quiet, and he showed up with them wordlessly the way he showed up with everything, simply and precisely. Soo-yoon met him on a Tuesday evening when Tae-woo arrived at our apartment with enough takeout for 3 and showed no sign of leaving. My brother sat across from him at our small kitchen table and stared with barely concealed assessment while Tae-woo ate with the focused efficiency of a man who regards meals as a task to be completed. So you're the guy, Soo-yoon said finally. Yes, said Tae-woo. Hyung talks about you. Or doesn't talk about you in a way that's very loud. Soo-yoon, I said. It's fine, said Tae-woo with a composure that was, I suspected, a cover for something warmer. He's right to be protective. I'm not being protective, Soo-yoon said. I'm being interested. There's a difference. Hyung doesn't let people close. If you're close, I want to understand why. Tae-woo set down his chopsticks. He looked at my brother with the same direct, undecorated gaze he turned on everything that mattered to him. Because I've been trying to be, he said, for 15 years. And I intend to stay that way. Soo-yoon blinked. Then he looked at me. And the look he gave me, teasing and tender in the complicated way of siblings, made me put my hands over my face. I like him, Soo-yoon told me as though Tae-woo were not sitting right there. I know, I said muffled by my hands. You should keep him. Soo-yoon. I'm just saying. It was around this time that Tae-woo brought up the club. We were in the car. He had driven me home after dinner at a restaurant that was several tax brackets above anything I had ever been to, and he was looking straight ahead at the road with the particular stillness that I had come to recognize as him composing himself before saying something significant. I have to say something, he said. All right, I said carefully. Pause. The cityscape moved past the windows and streams of light. I cannot continue watching you at that club, he said. I have tried. I have told myself that it is your choice and your livelihood and that I have no right, which is all true, but I am not succeeding at being rational about it. I turned to look at his profile. The set jaw. The hands precise on the steering wheel. It isn't rational, he continued, but it is honest. Every time another man looks at you, the way they look as though you are. He stopped himself. I cannot explain to you what it does to me without sounding like I'm trying to control you, which I'm not. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. But, I said softly, But, he said, I love you. Completely. And I am struggling. I was quiet for a moment. I looked out the window at the city, at all its glittering ordinary life, and I thought about the night I had sat on the edge of my bed and cried before calling Jae-hyun. The life I hadn't wanted but had chosen anyway because the people I loved had needed it from me. The cafe, I said. I've always wanted to open a cafe. A real one. Small with good coffee and... I know, said Tae-woo. I have some savings but not enough and... Soo Bin-hyung. What? He glanced over at me briefly, and the expression on his face was so completely unguarded that it hit me like a physical thing. Let me help, he said. Not as a transaction. Not as a condition of anything. Simply, let me help. Because I am able to, and because it matters to you, and because you matter to me more than any other thing in the world. I held this sentence in my chest for a long, full moment. Felt the weight of it. The warmth of it. This is very fast, I said. I have been waiting 15 years, he said with perfect simplicity. It does not feel fast to me. I looked at his hands on the wheel. I thought about a boy who had told me at 8 years old that he would find me again, and had meant it with every cell of his being. I thought about the corner booth. The careful patience of the weeks since that morning in his white-walled apartment. Okay, I said. Okay. Okay, I said. Yes. To all of it. The tiniest exhale. The smallest loosening of his shoulders. Thank you, he said very quietly. That night I gave my notice at Obsidian. I cried a little, privately, in the bathroom afterward, not because I would miss the place but because of what it had cost me to be there, and what it meant that I no longer had to be. Some griefs are about endings. Some are about the ending of a thing you never wanted in the first place. I let myself have the feeling. And then I washed my face. And I went home to my brother. It happened on a rain day. This is how I remember it and how I will always remember it. Not a date, not a season exactly, just the particular texture of a day when the rain came down heavy and relentless and the city went gray and quiet beneath it and the world contracted to the dimensions of a single small apartment. Soo-yun was at the university library, which he had told me at breakfast with the enthusiasm of someone who had found their correct habitat. I had spent the morning with my cafe business plan spread across the kitchen table, a spreadsheet on my laptop, a coffee going cold beside me. The rain had been building since noon. I heard his key in the door at 7 in the evening. I heard it before I saw him because his key in the lock had a particular sound, 3 attempts before success, a habit from years of the same lock in the same door, and I called out without looking up from my paperwork, "There's soup on the stove, it's been on low for an hour." And then I looked up. He was drenched. Completely, comprehensively soaked, his dark jacket plastered to his shoulders, his hair flat against his forehead, water running down his jaw, standing in my doorway with his shoes leaving wet prints on the floor and his tie, which he must have loosened in the car, hanging undone at his collar. He had clearly been caught in it. The kind of rain that comes suddenly, that overwhelms umbrellas and good intentions alike. He was looking at me. In the context of Kwon Tae-woo's general composure, the expression on his face at that moment was extraordinary. Something had slipped, some layer of the controlled, deliberate surface had been washed away with the rain, and what was underneath was simply want. Open and undisguised and completely, entirely directed at me. "Tae-woo," I said, getting up. "You're soaked, I'll get a towel?" He crossed the room. I don't know exactly how it happened in the specifics. Only that one moment I was turning toward the bathroom and the next his hands were at my waist, both of them pulling me toward him with a certainty that was not rough and was not gentle but was simply absolute, and then he was kissing me. The first time Kwon Tae-woo kissed me was nothing like what I might have expected from a man who prided himself on control. It was furious. Desperate. It was 15 years and 3 months and every unspoken thing he had ever compressed beneath the surface of his composure. All of it arriving at once, in the press of his cold rain-wet lips against mine, in the grip of his hands at my waist, in the sound he made deep in his throat when I kissed him back. It was not a careful kiss. It was a relief. I kissed him back. Because I wanted to. Because I realized, been wanting to for weeks, storing the want in the back of my chest where I kept the things I didn't allow myself to act on. Because the feeling of his hands on my waist was the feeling of something I had been missing without knowing what I was missing. Because he tasted of rain and something darker underneath and I wanted more of it. He walked me backward until I met the wall, and he pulled back just enough to look at me. His forehead against mine, both of us breathing, and his eyes, usually so guarded, were completely open. I could see everything in them. "Hyung," he said. Just that. Just my name in the form that was his alone. "I know," I said because I did. His lips moved from mine to my jaw, to the curve of my neck, just below my ear, and I felt my head tilt back involuntarily, felt the soft press of his mouth against my pulse point, felt the particular electric warmth of an alpha's lips at an omega's throat and understood in my whole body what that feeling meant. His hands spread across the small of my back, drawing me against him until there was nothing between us but the rapidly warming damp of his jacket. "Can I?" he started. "Yes," I said before he finished. He looked at me one more time, checking, making certain. And then he kissed me again, and this time it was slower, the fury settling into something deeper, more intentional, and his hands moved from my waist to my collar, working the buttons of my shirt with a concentration that made me feel precious and wanted in a way I had almost forgotten was possible. "You're still soaked," I said against his lips. "I am," he agreed and kept going. What followed was, I do not have adequate words for what followed. I have thought about this many times since, turned it over looking for language, and I keep arriving at the same conclusion. Some experiences refuse to be fully translated. They can only be gestured at. I can tell you that the rain was still falling outside, its sound a low constant percussion against the window. I can tell you that we moved from the wall to the bedroom with a shared wordlessness that felt like its own language. I can tell you that when we were finally bare before each other and he looked at me with those dark, serious eyes that had watched me from a corner booth, that had never lost me even when I didn't know I was being found, I felt seen in a way I had never been seen before. Not displayed. Not observed. He was gentle and he was certain, and those two things coexisted in him the way all his contradictions coexisted, not in opposition but in complement. His hands on my skin were thorough and careful. His mouth moved from my lips down the architecture of my throat, my collarbones, the flat plane of my chest, and each point of contact felt like a word being spoken in a language I was only now learning to read. "Soo Bin," he said quietly, my name in his mouth like something he had been meaning to say for a long time. "I'm here," I said. When he entered me it was, the word that arrives is electric, though it is insufficient. It was the sensation of a circuit completing. Something that had been open suddenly closed, something that had been reaching finding what it reached for. I gasped against his shoulder and held on to him and he held me back, his face against my neck, his hands in my hair, still for a moment, letting us both simply be in the fact of this. And then he moved. Each motion built on the last, each rhythm found and deepened, and I was not quiet. I couldn't have been quiet if I'd tried because what he was doing to me dismantled silence. He watched my face through it all with an intensity that should have been too much and was instead exactly right. "This is what I want," his eyes said, "to see you, every part of you, nothing hidden," and I let him. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I let someone fully in. "Tae-woo," I said, when the world went brilliant and white and I could feel myself coming apart at every seam. "I have you," he said low and steady. "I have you, Hyung." The rain came down outside. The city went on doing what cities do, vast and indifferent. And inside one small apartment, two people who had found each other across 15 years of loss and searching came home to each other in the oldest, most irreducible way. Afterward he held me. He was warm now, the rain chill long gone, and his heartbeat was steady beneath my ear and his hand moved slowly up and down my back in a rhythm that felt like deliberate comfort, like something he'd been saving. "I love you," I said. It was the first time I had said it. The words arrived without decision, the way the truest things arrive. His hand stilled. Then he pressed his lips to my hair. "Say it again," he said very quietly. "I love you, Tae-woo," I said. The sound he made was small and low and entirely unguarded. The sound of a person who has waited for something so long that the arrival of it is almost too much to hold. "I've loved you," he said, "since before I knew what love was." The rain did not stop until morning. Let it be said plainly, Kwon Tae-woo in love is an extraordinary phenomenon. I had seen the public version of him, the alpha who sat in boardrooms and said things that made financial journalists describe him in terms normally reserved for natural disasters. I had seen the private version too in the weeks of careful, patient courtship. But I had not yet seen this, Tae-woo in the full expression of his feelings for me with nothing held back. He was devoted in a way that was, at times, genuinely overwhelming. He texted me in the morning before I was awake. He showed up at the apartment with groceries because he had passed a market that was, I discovered, 40 minutes from his office in the opposite direction of anything he had reason to be doing. He sat with Soo-yoon and helped him with his economics coursework with a patience that was at direct odds with his professional reputation, explaining compound interest and market theory with the focused attention of a man who considered my brother's education to be personally important. He was also spectacularly, jealously, possessively in love with me. I discovered the extent of this gradually. The first indication was the way he went very still when a man at a restaurant, handsome, well-dressed, evidently interested, lingered at our table to speak to me a beat longer than was strictly conversational. I only noticed because of the quality of Tae-woo's stillness beside me, not the stillness of ease but of compressed reaction. The stillness of a man making a conscious decision not to do what he wanted to do. When the man left, I looked at Tae-woo. "You're going to break that chopstick," I said. He looked down at his hand. Released the chopstick. Exhaled. He was interested in you, he said. Yes, I agreed. And I'm sitting here with you. A beat. I know, he said. But you're still bothered. Yes, he said with characteristic honesty. I am working on being rational about it. How is that going? A very long pause. Poorly. I laughed. I couldn't help it. And the laugh dissolved the tension in him like water over ice. I watched it happen, the slow release of his shoulders, the careful reappearance of his composure, and he looked at me with those dark eyes and the expression that was still, weeks incapable of stopping my breath. You don't have to be rational, I said more gently. You can just be. I'm not going anywhere. I know, he said again, softer this time. Tae-woo. I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. Look at me. He did. There is no one, I said clearly, in this restaurant or this city or this world who is you. Do you understand? He turned his hand under mine and held it. His thumb moved across my knuckles slowly. I understand, he said. And, thank you. The jealousy was real and it was frequent and it was something we navigated together over time with the mixture of directness and patience that had become the primary language of our relationship. He never tried to restrict me, he had said it once and he meant it, and Tae-woo did not say things he did not mean. But he felt everything with a completeness that was, I came to understand, simply the way he was built. The same intensity that made him extraordinary in every other context turned, in love, into something absolute. I found I did not mind it most of the time. There was something in it, the knowledge that I was so thoroughly, completely wanted by this precise, powerful, contained man, that answered something in me that had been unanswered for a very long time. The orphaned Omega who had learned to need nothing from anyone was, it turned out, capable of being wanted back into wanting. We said it to each other often. Perhaps more than is conventional, but convention had never been our particular relationship's strongest feature. He would find me in the kitchen in the morning and press his lips to the back of my neck and murmur I love you against my skin like a reminder he kept for himself. I would look up from my paperwork and find him watching me and say it before he had the chance to say whatever it was he was about to say, and the smile that crossed his face, small, surprised, real, was one of the things I collected carefully. We made love in the early mornings when the city was still blue and quiet. We made love on evenings when one of us had had a hard day and needed the specific comfort of the other's skin. We made love slowly and with great deliberation, learning each other's language with the care of people who have waited long enough to be thorough about it. He was always attentive, always present. The alpha in him, dominant, certain, capable of overwhelming, was always in service of my pleasure, my comfort, my presence in the moment with him. Every touch was a question answered yes, every moment a confirmation of the decision we had made to find each other and stay found. You make sounds, he told me once in the dark, that I would do anything to hear. I pressed my face against his chest. That's very embarrassing. It is not, he said with conviction. It is my favorite thing in the world. I felt his heartbeat under my cheek. Even, steady, his particular rhythm. Tae-woo, I said. Hyung. I'm glad you found me. His arms tightened around me. The answer to this was not words, it was the simple, absolute increase in his hold, the way a person holds something they have found after long loss. The way you hold something you intend never to lose again. The cafe opened on a bright Saturday in early spring. I had chosen the name carefully and thought about it for weeks, turning options over the way I turned everything important. Soo-yoon suggested several that made me laugh. Tae-woo offered none and said he would love whatever I chose, and then one morning at 4 a.m. I sat up in bed and said the word aloud to the darkness. Harangue. After the house. After the place where we had both been broken open and remade. After the beginning. Tae-woo, who was a deeply light sleeper and had opened one eye at my sudden movement, looked at me in the dark. Harangue, I said again. The cafe. That's what I want to call it. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. That's right. The space was a corner shop in Mapo, not large but with beautiful bones, arched windows that caught the afternoon light, original brick beneath the plaster that we uncovered and kept, high ceilings that we fitted with pendant lights in warm amber tones. I designed the interior myself with a ferocity that surprised even me, spending weekends poring over paint samples and seating arrangements and the precise angle of the menu board with a devotion that Tae-woo observed with the particular fond attention he gave to watching me do things I loved. You're very serious about those mugs, he said once, watching me arrange and rearrange the mismatched ceramic cups I had collected from market stalls and small ceramic studios over the preceding months. The mugs are important, I said without looking up. The mugs are how people feel. A bad mug ruins the whole experience. Pause. That is genuinely true, he said, and I could hear, beneath the composure, that he found me wonderful. Soo-yoon worked the opening weekend, wearing the cafe's soft green apron with a pride that made my throat close. He had learned to make the simple drinks, the Americanos and lattes and the Hojicha latte that became, within the first week, Harangue's signature, with careful, cheerful enthusiasm. He greeted every customer with a warmth that was entirely his own, that I had somehow preserved in him through all the years of trying, and he was extraordinary at it. Tae-woo came in the afternoon of the first day, alone, and sat at the corner table by the window. He ordered a black coffee. He sat and drank it slowly and looked around the room with an expression that I caught across the cafe and had to look away from quickly because it was going to make me cry. He looked proud. Not in the way people perform pride, loudly, with commentary, but in the deep, certain way of someone witnessing the completion of something long coming. When I brought him a second coffee, unbidden, he looked up at me. "Hyung," he said. "Don't," I said, because I could already feel the emotion working up my throat. "Don't say it or I'll cry on your coffee." "I was going to say it's good coffee," he said. "You're a liar." "Also," he said, "I'm incredibly proud of you." I turned around and walked back to the counter and pretended to arrange things while Soo-yeon looked at me with the amused exasperation of someone watching a predictable thing happen. "He made you cry," Soo-yeon said. "He's infuriating," I said, wiping my eyes with my apron. "He's in love with you," Soo-yeon said. "Yes," I said. "That too." The cafe found its rhythm quickly. Word spread in the organic way that good, honest places gather their people. Slowly at first, then with the momentum of something that has found its correct orbit. Regular customers accumulated. The architecture student who came every morning and always took the same window seat. The pair of elderly women who came Wednesday afternoons and stayed 2 hours. The young couples and the solitary readers and the people who needed, simply, a place to be. I learned their orders. I learned which table they preferred and whether they liked to be spoken to or left alone. I put plants on the windowsills, trailing pothos and small succulent clusters and one tall fiddle leaf fig in the corner that became, improbably, a minor local landmark. I kept the music unhurried and the lighting warm and the cups mismatched and thoughtfully chosen. It was not a grand cafe. It was not going to make me wealthy. But it was mine, entirely mine, built from the ground up by hands that had washed dishes and danced on stages and turned every corner of 20 years of difficult living toward this single, specific dream. And every morning when I unlocked the door and stepped into the smell of coffee and warm wood and the particular quiet of a space before it fills with life, I felt something I had not felt enough of in my years. I felt that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Our relationship deepened in the way that good things deepen. Not with drama but with accumulation. Each day laid down another layer, another conversation, another shared silence, another small gesture given and received. Tae-woo was not a spontaneous person. He did not do surprise gestures or unexpected gifts for their own sake. These were not his language. His language was consistency. Showing up. Remembering. The quiet, relentless demonstration of the fact that I was at the center of his attention in all the ways that mattered. He remembered that I took my coffee with very little sugar. He noticed when I was stressed before I said anything. Something about the set of my shoulders, he told me, that he had memorized without deciding to, and he would simply appear beside me and place his hand at the small of my back without comment, the gesture itself the whole message. He told me, regularly and without embarrassment, that I was beautiful. He said it in the way he said most important things. Directly, as fact, with no performance attached. "You know," I told him once, when we were lying in the late evening quiet of his apartment, we had fallen into spending alternate nights at each other's places, a migration that had recently become, by mutual unspoken agreement, increasingly weighted toward his, because his apartment was larger and quieter and smelled of him. "For someone who is supposed to be terrifying, you are very openly sentimental." He considered this from beneath the arm he had folded behind his head. "Only with you," he said. "That's a very satisfying answer." "I know." I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. He looked back with those dark eyes that had always seemed to see further than was comfortable. "Are you happy?" I asked. He turned his head slightly. Looked at me the way he sometimes looked at me, with a completeness and unguardedness that made the word look seem too small. "Hyung," he said, "I have been looking for you for 15 years. I sit in your cafe and drink your coffee and I come home to you and I watch you sleep and I hold you and I am..." He paused. "There is no word adequate to what I am. Happy is a word for ordinary things." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I lay back down against his chest and listened to his heart. "I love you," I said. His arms closed around me. "And I you," he said. "More than is reasonable. More than is reasonable, Soo-bin." We argued sometimes. I would be wrong to omit this. He could be controlling without realizing it, not maliciously, not with any desire to diminish me, but because the habit of managing everything around him had been built over years and operated sometimes without his full awareness. I would notice it as a tightening feeling, a sense of being arranged rather than included, and I had learned, slowly, with effort, To name it directly rather than swallowing it. You made that decision without asking me, I told him once about something regarding the cafe lease renewal that he had moved to handle on my behalf without consultation. I was trying to help. I know, but it's my cafe, Tae-woo. My decision. He was quiet. And then, you're right. I'm sorry. No defensiveness. No justification. Just the direct acknowledgement and the commitment to do better. This, I had come to understand, was the deepest form of his respect for me, not the grand gestures but the capacity to be corrected and to mean his correction. In turn, I learned to tell him when I needed closeness rather than expecting him to guess. He was perceptive about many things but he was not psychic, and there were moments when I retreated into my internal world, the habit of the orphan child, the person who has learned to need no one, and he could not reach me there unless I opened the door. So I learned to open it. To say I'm struggling today or I need you close or simply hold me without the old shame of need. You can always ask, he told me once. For anything. I want you to ask. It doesn't come easily, I said. I know, he said. I'll wait until it does. That was the thing about Tae-woo. He would always wait. He had been waiting his entire adult life. A little more time was nothing to him, as long as I was at the end of it. 3 years into the cafe. 4 years into us. Soo-yoon had graduated, first in his cohort, which he announced at a family dinner we held at the cafe after closing, with a specific kind of pride that made both Tae-woo and me put down our chopsticks and simply look at him for a moment. First, I said. First, he confirmed, bright-eyed and grinning. Top of the year. I got up from the table and hugged him so hard he laughed. Over his shoulder, I could see Tae-woo watching us with the quiet, concentrated expression he wore when something moved him that he was not going to perform being moved by. I owe both of you, Soo-yoon said when I released him. He was looking at Tae-woo now. You too. Don't think I don't know. You don't owe me anything, Tae-woo said. I know you think that, said Soo-yoon, which is exactly why I'm saying it. A beat. The tiniest softening in Tae-woo's face. Congratulations, he said. You worked hard for this. Hyung worked hard for me to work hard for this, Soo-yoon said, turning back to me. His voice had shifted, quieter now, the easy banter gone to something underneath it. I know what you gave up, Hyung. I've always known, even when I was too young to understand it. I need you to know that I know. The cafe was quiet except for the rain beginning outside. It had been threatening all evening. I looked at my brother, this tall, bright, beautiful young man who had been 5 years old with brass buttons on his jacket standing on the steps of Harang House, and I felt something in me settle, fully and finally, into a peace it had been searching for 20 years. You don't need to, I started. I do, he said. Let me. I let him. Thank you, Hyung, he said simply. For everything. I pressed my fingers to my eyes, laughed a little at myself, felt Tae-woo's hand settle at my back, that familiar, grounding gesture. We should eat, Soo-yoon said with the practiced pragmatism of someone who knows when the emotional intensity of a moment needs a practical redirect. I ordered the good jokbal. When did you order jokbal? When you were hugging me. I used one hand. Tae-woo made a sound that, from him, constituted a laugh. We ate, the three of us, in the amber warmth of Café Harang while the rain came down outside, and I looked at the table, the mismatched plates, the half-drunk drinks, the face of my brother and the face of the man I loved, and I thought, this is the thing I was building toward. All of it. Every part. This exact moment. There is a morning ritual we have. Tae-woo wakes before I do, always, without exception, like something internal in him begins at a fixed hour regardless of intention. He gets up without disturbing me, and by the time I surface into consciousness the apartment is filled with the smell of coffee being made in the kitchen, and if I lie still and quiet I can hear him moving around in there, the soft specific sounds of his morning, which I have learned as fluently as any language I have ever spoken. I come into the kitchen and he is already at the counter, 2 cups in preparation, and he turns when he hears me and looks at me in the way he has been looking at me for years now, like finding something over and over. Like the finding never gets ordinary. Morning, I say. Morning, he says. He hands me my coffee, the way I take it, which he has never once gotten wrong. We stand at the window. The city outside is doing what cities do, going about its vast and ordinary business of existing. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it doesn't. I lean against him and he wraps one arm around me and we drink our coffee in the quiet that has become the most precious thing I own. This particular silence, particular to us, that is made of everything we have said and done and been to each other and contains it all without needing to rehearse it. Do you ever think about Harang House? I ask sometimes. Every day, he says without hesitation. What do you think about? The bunk bed, he says. You, leaning over the edge trying to decide whether to be angry at me. I laugh. I wasn't angry. You were a little angry. You told me my mother wasn't coming back. She wasn't. I know, I say. I know she wasn't. Pause. His arm tightens around me. I think about how long it took me to find you, he says, and how I would do it again. All of it. As long as it ended here. I tilt my head up to look at him. He is looking out the window and the morning light catches his profile, the serious jaw, the dark eyes, the face that has become more familiar to me than any landscape, and I think with a completeness that goes all the way down. I love you. I love you. I love you. Tae-woo, I say. Hyung. I love you. He looks down at me. That expression, guarded surface, unguarded depth, the whole of him right there in his eyes for me to see. And I love you, he says. More than is reasonable. You always say that. It is always true. Outside, the first drops of rain begin against the glass. The city grays and quiets. Somewhere across the city, my cafe is waiting to open its doors, to fill with the smell of coffee and the warmth of mismatched cups and the presence of all the people who have chosen to make it their quiet place. My brother is sleeping in his own apartment now. His first, paid for by his own first salary, which he texted me about at 11 p.m. on the day his offer letter arrived in all caps, with 17 exclamation marks. And here, at the window in the rain, Kwon Tae-woo holds me the way he has always held me, like something found, like something kept, like something he intends to go on holding for as long as there are mornings. I press my face against his chest. I hear his heart, steady, even. His particular rhythm, which I know now as well as I know my own. I'm here, it says. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And I am, finally, after all of it, all the loss and the stripping bare and the years of holding together by will alone, finally, completely, home. There are nights that do not announce themselves. No ceremony. No particular reason written in the calendar or the weather or the quality of the light. They arrive the way the most significant things in my life have always arrived. Quietly, without warning, in the ordinary middle of an ordinary evening that becomes, before I fully understand how, something I will carry for the rest of my life. This was one of those nights. We had closed the cafe together. This happens sometimes, Tae-woo finishing early, arriving in the amber warmth of the last hour before closing and sliding into the corner table by the window the way water finds its level, natural and inevitable. He brought paperwork he did not look at. He drank the coffee I brought him. He watched me. He was always watching me. Even now, 4 years in, 4 years of mornings and arguments and laughter and the slow, thorough building of a life that fit us both, his attention had not dimmed by a single degree. If anything, it had deepened, the way things deepen when they are given time and tending. He watched me the way astronomers watch a star they have staked their life's work on, with a certainty that the watching was worthwhile. I watched him back when he wasn't looking. Soo-yoon had taken the closing tasks with a cheerful efficiency that I suspected was calculated. He had developed, over time, an ability to read the atmosphere between Tae-woo and me with a precision that was either impressive or alarming, and he had a habit of arranging situations accordingly. He kissed my cheek at the door, told Tae-woo to drive carefully, and disappeared into the evening with the satisfied air of someone who has done a good deed. We walked to the car in the cool spring night, our shoulders touching. He did not take my hand immediately. He rarely did, straight away, as if he needed to warm toward touch the way a room warms after the heat is turned on. But by the time we reached the car, his fingers had found mine in the dark, and I turned my hand to hold his properly, and that was enough. We drove in the particular silence of people who no longer need to fill silence. The city moved past the windows in its familiar choreography of light and motion, and I rested my head against the seat and looked at his profile in the glow of passing street lamps, the clean line of his jaw, the composed set of his mouth, the hands sure on the wheel, and felt the warmth of loving him move through me like a tide. "You're staring," he said without turning. "I know," I said. A beat. The almost smile. "Hyung. Stop looking at me like that while I'm driving." "Why?" "Because," he said, his voice dropping half a register, "it is distracting." I smiled at the window. His apartment was quiet. It had become our apartment in everything but the lease. My things had migrated here drawer by drawer, shelf by shelf, until the space contained us both in a way that felt entirely natural, my plants on his windowsills and his measured order coexisting with my comfortable disorder in the negotiated equilibrium of two people learning to share a world. He made tea. I changed into softer clothes and came back to find him at the kitchen counter, 2 cups steeping, his jacket gone and his sleeves turned back at the wrist in the way that meant he was settled, that the part of him that existed in the world's demands had been set aside for the night. I crossed the kitchen and stood behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist and pressed my face against the broad warmth of his back. He went very still. Not with tension. With that other stillness, the one I knew, the one that meant he was simply feeling something and taking a moment to fully inhabit it. His hand came down to cover mine at his stomach. "Hard week?" he asked quiet. "No," I said muffled against his back. "Good week. Good day." I tightened my arms. I just wanted to do this. He turned slowly and I let him turn, and then his arms were around me and my face was against his chest. The best place in the world, the place that had become over 4 years as familiar and necessary as sleep. And his chin rested on my hair and we stood in the kitchen while the tea steeped and the city went quietly about its business outside the windows. Soo Bin, he said, his voice low just above my ear. I love you. I pressed closer. I know, I said. I love you too. His hands moved across my back. Slowly. The deliberate, attentive quality of his touch that had not, in 4 years, become careless. As though each time was a choice consciously made. As though he was always, in some fundamental sense, aware of what it meant to hold me. I tilted my head up. He looked down at me. Those dark eyes, near and serious and full of something that had no clean name, that specific compound of devotion and desire and the accumulated depth of years that belonged only to us, that we had built together and could not have existed otherwise. He kissed me, slowly. The way he kissed me when there was nowhere to be and nothing required of us, thoughtfully, with full attention, his hand cupping my face with a gentleness that always undid something in me. I kissed him back and felt the warmth of it spread through my whole chest, felt the particular loosening of everything I carried when I was in his arms, the way my body understood before my mind did that this was safety. This was home. His mouth moved from my lips to the corner of my jaw, to the soft place beneath my ear where he knew, had learned precisely, that I could not remain composed. I exhaled against his shoulder and my fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt and he made a low sound against my skin that traveled through me like warmth through cold water. Tae-woo, I said softly. I know, he said, echoing me back. The tea was forgotten. He carried the memory of my body with a thoroughness that still, after all this time, astonished me. Not just the obvious things, though those too, the specific architecture of me that he had learned with patient, devoted attention. But the smaller things. The fact that I needed a moment of stillness before I could fully arrive, needed to feel settled before sensation could open me fully. The fact that I grew quiet just before I became undone. That my sounds lessened to a concentrated silence in the moments before they became most true. He knew this. He read me with the precision of long intimacy, adjusting without being told, as attuned to the frequency of my wanting as he was to his own. He undressed me with care. Not hurried. He was never hurried with me, had never once made me feel like a destination to be reached rather than a landscape to be moved through. He traced the lines of my shoulders, my collarbones, the pale expanse of my chest, with the focused attention of a man who finds the territory endlessly worth returning to. You are, he said, his voice very low in the dim warmth of the bedroom, the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You say that every time, I said. Because it is true every time. I reached up and brought his face down to mine and kissed him, slow and deep, and felt him exhale into it, that specific sound of a man releasing the last of his distance, arriving fully into the moment with me. We moved together with the ease of people who know each other's language, who have learned, through patience and repetition and genuine attention, the grammar of each other's desire. His hands were warm and certain and everywhere deliberate, and mine found the familiar landscape of him with the specific pleasure of knowing exactly, of being known exactly in return. When he pulled me close and settled over me, his eyes found mine in the low light, and he held there for a moment, just looking, just breathing, and I understood, as I always did in this particular moment, that this was not merely physical for him, that it had never been merely anything. The alpha in him, that gravity, that certainty, was in complete service of this, seeing me, being seen. Okay, he asked. Always, even now. Yes, I said. Always, come here. He moved with a rhythm that built the way music builds, from something quiet and contained towards something that filled the whole room, the whole world, the whole available space of what I was capable of feeling. I held on. My hands in his hair, his name in my mouth, the specific heat of his skin against mine in the particular way that was only ever him, only ever this. He spoke to me throughout. Not always with words, sometimes with the press of his lips to my temple, my cheekbone, the line of my throat, each contact a sentence in itself. But sometimes with words too low and intent, the kind of words that exist in a different register than ordinary speech. The language of someone who needs you to know, in the moment of knowing, that you are everything. I have you, he said at one point. The same words from that very first night, the night of the rain, 15 years of searching ending in his arms. I know, I said, and meant it absolutely. The world beyond the window, the city, the spring night, all the vast ordinary continuation of things, receded to something distant and irrelevant. There was only this room. Only his hands and his voice and the weight of him and the warmth of him and the specific, irreplaceable fact of him, this man who had told me at 8 years old that he would find me and had spent the better part of his life meaning it. When I came apart, it was with his name. It always was. And he held me through it with a completeness that was, I thought, distantly, from somewhere behind the brilliance of sensation, its own kind of love letter. His arms around me even at the moment of greatest vulnerability. His voice at my ear, steady and low, grounding me the way only he could ground me, back to myself and to him and to the fact of us. He followed not long after, with a sound I kept private and precious and entirely for myself, the sound of Quan Te Wu fully undone, which was a gift I did not take lightly. Afterward. The city was quiet now, the late night quiet, the city's exhale. We lay tangled in the warmth of each other, the covers loose and the room dim and his heartbeat steady beneath my ear where it always was, where I always found it. His hand moved slowly through my hair. Up and down, the repetition of it as settling as rain on a roof. Tae-woo, I said. Hyung. What are you thinking about? Pause. His hand continued its slow movement. A bunk bed, he said. I laughed, unexpected, genuine, startled out of me. You always think about the bunk bed. It was a formative location, he said, and the absolute seriousness with which he said it made me laugh again. You were 8 years old. I was a perceptive 8-year-old. I pressed my smile against his chest. Tae-woo, I said more softly. I used to think, I said slowly, that love was something that happened to other people. The kind of people who didn't start where I started. Who hadn't lost what I'd lost. Pause. I kept it very small. Well, the hope of it. I kept it only as big as Soo-yun, only as wide as what I needed to survive. He was very still. Listening with his whole body the way he always listened. And then, I said, you found me. In my corner booth. Your corner booth? A slight lift of something amused. My corner booth that you had taken over, I amended. And you, I paused. Found the words. You made more room. Just by being there. You made more room in me for things I had decided not to want anymore. His arms tightened. That familiar wordless answer. I'm not small anymore, I said. In the way I mean. I'm not keeping myself small. No, he agreed quietly. That's because of you. A long silence. His heartbeat steady and sure. No, Hyung, he said finally, his voice low. That's because of you. He paused, choosing with care the way he always chose. I only showed up. You did the rest. I thought about this. About the boy on the orphanage steps who promised his brother he wasn't going anywhere. About the young man crying in a bathroom at midnight before making a call he hated having to make. About the person who had walked into Harang Cafe on its first morning and unlocked the door and stepped into the smell of coffee and allowed himself, finally, to want what he had always wanted. We both showed up, I said. His lips pressed to my hair. Once. Twice. Yes, he said. We did. I fell asleep to his heartbeat. I have fallen asleep to it hundreds of times by now, and I expect to fall asleep to it hundreds of times more, and it has not become ordinary. It will not become ordinary. Some things, the things that were a long time coming, the things that were built slowly and against considerable odds, do not flatten into habit. They remain, somehow, in the category of gift. Outside, the spring night continued. Somewhere across the city, Café Harang stood dark and quiet and ready for morning, its mismatched cups on their shelves, its plants on the windowsills, its corner table by the window waiting. Somewhere, Soo-yun was asleep in his own apartment with his economics books probably still open on the desk. And here, in this room, in this life we had assembled piece by piece from the ruins of beginnings neither of us had chosen. Quan Tae-woo held me in the particular, absolute way of someone who has no intention of letting go. I am 30 years old. I have a cafe and a brother and a man who loves me with a completeness that still, some mornings, catches me off guard. I was abandoned at 10 years old in front of a yellow building with blue shutters. I am improbably, gloriously, completely happy. I used to think happiness was a door that only opened for certain people. Then I realized I had been holding the key the whole time, I just needed someone to remind me of which pocket it was in.